So I think, why don't we just go ahead and jump right into it? Phoenix had mentioned that he wanted to kind of start things off talking a little bit of Acolyte. Am I correct?
Yeah, we can start there. I guess we're a little late to the game now. Show's been over
Yeah.
for
How long's it been out?
what, 2, 3 weeks? It came out probably about 2 months
I
ago,
think it
maybe
was
for
going.
what, 8 episodes.
It was going on right when I was like on vacation, which that was what, like 3 weeks ago. I think at this point, 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say it came out about a month and a half, 2 months ago. And I went and jumped into it. I'd kind of been on a bit of a Star Wars kick as of late, ever since we saw what was it, Episode One, because they brought that back in theaters for the
Mm-hmm.
25th anniversary.
That's
So kind of
right.
that spurred me into hopping back into everything, because that was in, oh, I'm not gonna get the date right, April, May. It was kind of like early summer that hit theaters. Then I went ahead and watched episode two, episode three, four, five, six, and then I kind of stopped there because I didn't want to get into the Disney movies. But
Mm-hmm.
then I started picking up on the shows. I watched a little bit of Ahsoka, which, oh
I
man,
heard it was not
that's a show.
terribly well received.
Yeah, that can be a different conversation, but I did not enjoy most of that. Kind of skipped through a lot of it. And I had seen most of the other ones already. I'd watched Obi-Wan. I'd seen I think all the Mandalorian.
Mandalorian.
I had skipped through Book of Boba Fett a little. That one didn't grab me too much, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I was in a mood for this. Like, the
I
premise of this one actually seemed interesting. It was different. It was a different time period than we've spent a whole lot of time with in
mhm.
Star Wars. Kind of that, what is it called? The High Republic
I
timeline or era, where it's
believe
kind of like right before the
so.
prequel stuff.
Yeah, I believe there's
Yeah.
some weird thing I think I was reading where like technically some of the villains in this are like the ones that we know in the original series are like either non-existent or like ridiculously young at this time point in the
Yeah, it's kind
series.
of like that precursor for everything in episode one and beyond. So, I don't know. It was an interesting kind of time period. Thought that might be fun. I didn't watch it week to week with it. I kind of was like, you know what? I'm gonna let this whole thing kind of wrap up in Disney Plus and just kind of binge it all at once. And because of that, I of course kind of picked up on a lot of little like controversies that would pop up, because this was a hot button topic, I think, for a lot of people for various reasons. I
Can
tried
I
my best to avoid some of those spoilers, but oh, go ahead.
just real quick, just to throw in something since you brought it up. That was one big problem I had with this show, and I don't know if Disney does this a lot with their other. I haven't watched a lot of their other Star Wars television shows, but like
Mhm.
this show was so bad with cliffhangers. Literally, like you would go certain episodes where like there's a lot of dialogue, couple things happen, and then literally at the end of the episode, it's like major reveal. Oh, the episode's over.
Mm.
Almost every episode ended
You
like
know,
that, and it was pretty bad. I
that
thought.
may be true. I didn't feel that as much, probably because I binged it. And to be fair, I was kind of like I was doing other things while watching it, which is probably not the best way to kind of watch a show like this.
Doing the
But
laundry.
there were points where I didn't realize like one episode had moved on to the other one. It just kind of
Mm-hmm.
blended together. So I'm not saying you're wrong. Like, it definitely had those moments that built up to like, oh, I wonder who's that guy. What are they doing over here? And then it cut to credits. So I think that's a pretty common thing. They always kind of want to leave that lure hanging to pull you into the next episode. And the way this ended, the way they're trying to pull you into the next season with that big cliffhanger for season one. But we can get to that in a bit. Anyways, I wanted to go into this pretty positively. I don't know about you, but I think I've gotten a little fatigued of hating every show that I watch. I don't know if you felt the same way. Um, so I really wanted to come at this with a fairly optimistic lens, even with the controversy and kind of hot button stuff that was out there. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of wanted to, take it for what it was, try to enjoy what I could. By no means that doesn't mean you shouldn't be critical about a show. I mean, of course, if there are issues, it's productive to call them out and try to see when writing could be better and things may feel contrived. But I think coming at it from an initial stance of, man, this is gonna suck, and that kind of paints the whole picture before you even get into it,
Mm-hmm.
is at least a perspective I want to move away from. So,
So
I thought the show. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna. I don't want to tell you off your. I was just gonna say like the one thing I really appreciate about this show is at the bare minimum, I loved the idea of it, like what they were trying to go for, and I feel like the way they kind of approach some of the story and what they were trying to do with this whole
Mm,
again if it's not obvious to anyone, but many spoilers are going to be here for the Acolyte and for Deadpool and Wolverine. So huge spoilers if you haven't seen any of those. But uh, uh, like I really enjoyed where they were going about with the whole just the kind of connective tissues that it was going to have to things like Anakin and the original
Yeah.
just the birth of, the chosen one, or whatever their kind of plot line that they had with some of the more like modern George Lucas stuff he had, with some of the Star Wars stuff. But sorry, I didn't give you
Yeah, I
this
agree. The
commercial.
premise of this show, I think, had a lot of promise. And I think there's definitely some wasted potential that I want to talk about towards the end. But this is an interesting time period. As I said, we don't have a lot, at least in kind of the mainstream Star Wars canon, that really dives into this. I know there's, I don't even know how much extended universe stuff is even canon anymore. I know Disney threw a lot of it out, so knowing what's accurate at this early time period is kind of rough. But yeah, it's neat that pre-episode 1, the stuff kind of leading into the potential, Darth Plagueis emergence, I thought is interesting because, as you said, that kind of leads down to the whole thing of how he figures out how to manipulate the Force to
Mm-hmm.
cause life, which is what spurs Anakin. And there's a story thread there that I think is interesting.
And
Now,
then the whole
did they
idea of
land
the,
it
what
super
was it called?
well?
Divergence is what Soul was
The
calling it.
Virgins, I think is what it
Vergence,
was. Yeah.
like a concentrated area of the Force that has the power to bring life. Like there's cool ideas here.
Yeah, and that's probably a good place to start, to kind of once again give this show, I think, the most optimistic kind of viewpoint we can. Let's start pros for a minute. So I did like the premise, as we said, that lead up to once again Plagueis and the whole manipulation of the life force. I thought some of the fights were pretty good. I know a lot of people were kind of critiquing like the hand-to-hand combat
I was gonna
stuff,
say
which
there's like
fair
martial
enough,
arts
but
here.
yeah, which I think some people were looking at that it was, I don't know, didn't flow well, wasn't choreographed well. But the lightsaber stuff I actually thought was pretty good. The fight in the jungle,
Great.
that was pretty
The
brutal.
Stranger or whatever he
There's
starts out is called.
Yeah, so there's some moments in that were some of the most intense like moments, especially like as far as like death scenes that I've seen in a Star
Mm-hmm.
Wars, really anything in quite a while. So the part where he grabs the one chick and tick, 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 just kind of try
That's
stabs her in the chest.
that's the first child killed in the Star Wars world since our boy Annie.
I know, gotta bring back them younglings. Then he snapped the one dude's neck. Like there were some pretty vicious moments there. So that definitely was an interesting, not interesting, but a cool way to kind of set up those fight scenes and give them a little more
He
veracity.
skewered two Jedi. He stabbed one and
Yeah,
then pulled force pulled one, the other one into his lightsaber. Like there
right
was
into the
some,
other one.
yeah, some crazy
So
stuff
like
in
those
there.
were good. The last one was Soul and the stranger slash what was his name, like Qatar, you
Kamir,
remember?
Kamir.
Kamil? Yeah. Um, So, I mean, I thought a lot of that was good, the lightsaber stuff. And the other combat, once again, you could argue that. But even like the opening scene that you had kind of frozen there with Endara and at that point the unknown assassin, like that wasn't too bad. It maybe was a little contrived in spots, but it had some cool moments like where she threw the knife down to distract her, and that's when she kind of went for her kill there
Mm,
at the end. Do you remember that?
yeah.
So
Well,
I
she
don't know.
threw
I
the
liked a
knife
lot of
because
the fight stuff.
yeah, she threw the knife at one of the barkeep or whoever was in control of the place. That was kind of a neat reveal too, like kind of seeing that like the barkeep's kid was like underneath the bar too.
Hmm.
So I don't know, kind of showing a little bit of the wavering. I don't know. I guess
Are you
emotions
talking about
within the
when
character.
she didn't actually follow through with killing them? They kind of let the barkeep and her kid, his kid, get by. Is that what we're talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I have a lot I want to say about how those characters and their motivations for morality kind of shift, but that'll get to the con, so I want to hold off
That
on that.
happens a
Um,
lot throughout the series. Like that's why
yeah,
yeah, I feel like me personally the writing is probably the weakest point of this entire
sure.
season 1, or I'm assuming there's going to be a
Yeah,
season 2. That's why
they want a season
yeah,
two,
they
but
have to.
I'm I'll do it. Let's not go too far down
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
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 a couple
yeah.
more pros I want to mention before we start really digging in.
Hmm.
I like when they explore the negative or the faults of the Jedi Order. Like the prequels kind of touched on that. Like, the Jedi Order isn't this perfect, altruistic, organization. They've got their issues. And this one really kind of, I think, demonstrates that. You kind of see like the secrets that were being hidden, some of the motivations for why they did certain things, which some of it's a little contrived, I think, when we get into the
Hmm.
writing aspect of it, but I like the idea of it isn't just, Jedi all good, Sith all evil. I mean, I know that's probably where Lucas wanted to kind of lead it, where it's very much, black and white in a lot of ways, but I
But
like that gray area they kind of painted in there. And to be fair, Lucas brought that up when he started looking at the prequels, right? That was a seed he kind of planted that this really kind of expands upon.
The difference, though, is I feel like with the way George was approaching it, he was making it seem as though they were more just unaware of the decisions they were making that were kind of messing them up versus like in this modern Star Wars, it feels like people are kind of knowingly being bad and making the wrong decisions. Like
So yes,
I almost feel
and
like
I don't disagree with that.
with this story, like there's is it any fun if there's like no protagonist? Like it feels like everyone's kind of like an antagonist who's kind of I don't know, kind of looking out for themselves and stuff.
I mean, to be fair, I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to broaden the picture of both sides. Like, as in the Jedi's, at least looking back to like the original trilogy, were pretty one note. Like they were the good guys. There was no really deviation from that. The prequels, you're right, only kind of touched base on it more that they were at fault because they weren't aware of some of the stuff going on. They were kind of tricked, and that made them make bad decisions. But I don't even think that's 100% true. Like honestly, if you look at even like Episode 1. I think a lot of people would kind of agree that Qui-Gon was probably one of the what's the right phrasing
He
for this?
was
I want to say most morally clear Jedi, the one most people kind of root for, but he very much was against where the Jedi Order was because they wanted to shut down all emotions. That was,
I was gonna
path
say
to the dark
he
side.
acted largely on emotions and kind of that was something you're not supposed to do within the Jedi Order.
Well,
Is
and he was more
yeah.
about finding that balance where it seems like the Jedi leaned one direction, just like the Sith leaned one direction. Qui-Gon was kind of finding that middle ground a little bit, which I think was kind of antithesis to where the Order was in those first few episodes. And this kind of builds upon it. Like, it kind of shows the negative of that, too. If you are overly emotional, what that can lead to. That was Soul's big issue, which I really liked the Soul character in this. Did you
I
ever
liked
see the
him
Squid Game,
for
by the way?
which one? I saw Squid Game. Yeah,
Because, this is the Squid
yeah,
Game
it's a Squid
actor.
Game guy.
Yeah.
I liked him for a large portion of the show, and then towards the end, I felt like he began to, I don't know, just I think it was on purpose. I think again they were like you're saying they're trying to portray some of these characters as good natured, good meaning people who just
Hmm.
happen to let their emotions guide them in the direction of making the wrong decision. But it's like I don't know. It ends up not being fun, at least in my opinion. I don't know.
Well, I do agree that, I mean, I liked the Soul character as a whole. I liked the performance. I do feel like some of the decisions he made towards the end, I think is more of a writing issue.
Mm-hmm.
Which I mean, also I guess that goes to the character and how they were portraying him, I suppose. But just once again, to stay positive. As a whole, I liked the Soul character. I liked the Khmer character too. The
Yeah,
kind of
he's
early
probably the best
villain for the
character in the
most
whole
part.
show, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get quite enough of him. Like they're definitely teasing kind of his backstory with him. He was apprentice of the one,
Apprentice of
the Green Jedi. I
Vernestra.
thought I had her name.
Vernestra.
Yeah.
Who
So
is
there's
the
definitely some
who is
story
the
beats
wife
there.
of the writer of the showrunner.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I
it's
didn't
the
know
wife.
that.
That's why
Oh, well, maybe.
a lot of people were kind of looking at her like her performance wasn't the
Yeah.
total best, and a
I
lot of
was.
people are, yeah.
That's what I was gonna say. Like I'm kind of praising Khmer and Soul and the actors and how they portrayed them, but when it comes to that particular character, the acting was
Yeah, she
pretty
wasn't like
one note.
awful,
There
but
wasn't a lot
it
of
was a
depth
one
to
note
where she was
character.
at.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I
But
didn't think her
I don't know.
I didn't think the makeup team did a great job with her character either. I don't know. It just was a weird setup.
Yeah, that's fair. But I think that's a shorter list. I think looking back than I wanted to be. That's most of my pros, to be honest. I like the premise. I like some of the fights. Some of the performances is really good, and their take on the Jedi and even the Force and kind of what it is to other entities. I thought that was interesting because like
Hmm.
the witches have a different way of viewing the Force, and of course, the Sith and the Jedi view the Force differently. And now it looks like you have some Force users in between that are kind of figuring out what the Force means to them. So it does broaden it. I mean, I can understand where you're like, it makes it everybody's too kind of ambiguous, and there's not enough clear. This is the right,
Hmm.
narrative perspective to kind of get behind. So that's fair, but I like a little bit of complexity because the old movies didn't have a lot of complexity. I say it was very much good, bad, and this adds a little more nuance to it.
I mean,
Now, does it work all the time? No, but I don't know.
I just thought maybe the only good character. Like if you like look at decisions and what people they were trying to do, I think Andara might be the only like character who made like the right decision at integral times, and solely the only reason why she was kind of lying towards the end with the Jedi is because of her people making stupid mistakes. Her Torben, her
Mm.
Padawan, you know, getting on the speeder and rushing off because he doesn't want to
Oh
be
yeah.
there, and then Saul following, and she basically is cleaning up their mess throughout the entire time. And she's
Yeah.
even like the Jedi, the Council are telling us to leave these people alone. We're interfering with their life. You know, we're not supposed to be here. And I don't know, I felt like she may have been the only good character.
But still define good in this perspective. I'm kind of playing devil's advocate with you. I'm sorry, but
She still hides
okay.
the
So
truth
yes,
at the end. So I mean,
well, not just that, but so she made the right logical choices based upon the rules of the order and whatnot.
doing what
Yes,
she
we
was
shouldn't just
told.
run to this place and
Yeah.
grab the kids, but there was clearly some importance to both those kids and Saul's rationale for wanting to pull them and investigate this virgins, which was clearly associated with these children, was an important thing. Even once again, go back to Qui-Gon. Like, he was disobeying the order by wanting to continually train Anakin. Now, was that the right decision, wrong decision? Like, I think when you just say this is the good answer, the good character and their decisions versus the bad character and their decisions, like I appreciate that this show tried to add a little more complexity and nuance to that. So
Hmm.
I guess that's where I'm at. As it doesn't always work. There's plenty of times where you're like, that particular choice felt maybe overly illogical or overly contrived, and I think that can be a problem. But I don't know. I like to at least introduced it because a lot of other shows don't. So.
And even
Um,
like, or sorry, where were you gonna go?
Oh, that's fine. I was seeing if I had any other pros, but you go
Uh,
ahead.
no, I was just gonna say I don't know if I'm shooting too far ahead, but like even though I disliked a lot of the again the premise of what they were going for, I liked the whole premise of it kind of turning on its face, the whole idea of May and Osha, you know, one leaning towards the
Mhm.
dark and one leaning towards the light. I liked the whole turn of it being um of it being the opposite, of Osha being the one who wants to kind of go and be off. And it makes sense because throughout her whole thing, they're always telling her, or Soul throughout the thing is telling her she has to gain better control of her emotions and all of this stuff. And it ends up leading to Kamir kind of leaning into that and like telling her, no, you need to
Mhm.
lean into your emotions. It makes you more powerful. All of that stuff, like premise wise, it's cool and it's fun. And
How
you
they
know
get to
how
each
they,
part is where it has trouble.
yeah. And I don't know, the flips that the characters make throughout is
Mhm.
quite sudden. I don't know.
So I guess we can start digging into the cons a little bit, and I really, I have several, but there's two big ones. I think you'll probably agree, and we kind of flesh these out. So
It's
this
not Jedi
show is
Wookiee.
really,
Jedi Wookiee is a positive. Jedi Wookiee is a big
uh,
positive.
if only he was the protagonist in the whole thing. He would have been the morally correct narrative character to follow.
Yes, yes.
Anyway,
Sorry.
there's really two, I think, really important things in this show that kind of make this show what it is, that to make it work. You have the Osha May character dynamic, right? They're your protagonists, however you want to phrase it. And then you have the incident that kind of causes everything, right? The stuff kind of in the
Mm-hmm.
flashback scenes that happens in the witch temple. Like, those are the two most important things in this show because those characters are clearly, it's all about them and their association with the Force and the Virgins, etc., their relationship to one another. And then, of course, the at least narrative thread is that moment that kind of kicks off this whole thing, right? Instigates how Osha becomes who she is, and where May goes, and all of that. And for having these two super crucial things, both of those are the parts of the show that have the biggest problems, at least in my opinion. Starting with the Osha May thing, I think we've kind of already hit on it, but barring just some general, I think, portrayals of each character, the back and forth of flipping their morality is really jarring. It's very rarely, I think, supported well with any kind of like good rationale for why they switch sides. So I think you had mentioned it a few times, but let's say we're talking about Osha. Osha clearly starts out as the good character, right? Once again, good in quotes based on everything
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about. And then after she watches all of her Jedi friends, colleagues, whatever, get slaughtered, and then wakes up with the guy who just slaughtered them,
And
she's
he's
like,
hot. She's like, oh yeah.
cool. Yeah, and I wasn't sure if we want to go that route or not. But even if you set aside that, she's intrigued enough with this guy not to be overly weary of him. Like she doesn't ever seem like she's like, well, maybe I shouldn't be teaming up or hanging out with this dude and chilling out in his cave apartment. I don't know.
She
She
liked his
buddies
lightsaber.
with him. Yeah. She warms up to him way too quick and really just forgets about all the terrible things he just did.
Yeah.
It's not even like he takes a lot of time to really explain it in detail. If he gave some
Mm-mm.
really good reason, like, look, I slaughtered these people because they did X, Y,
I
Z to me.
slaughtered
Like
a
he
child
hints
in
at
front of
it.
you.
Yeah, yeah, it's horrible stuff that he does. It's not stuff that you just kind of sweep under the rug, right? Like he did these terrible things to people who she apparently grew up with. What was the one
Oh,
dreaded Jedi Knight?
Yord.
Yord, yeah. Like I don't know if they were like friends, but they clearly had known each other for quite a while and had some kind of, relationship to one another. And he just got his neck snapped. Like all of that made it very hard for me to believe this switch she all of a sudden did, where that was the path where she started to go down the dark path a little bit, put
Mm-hmm.
on the helmet, was really just kind of taking whatever this guy said and just kind of like, yeah, okay, yeah, that sounds good. And then she flips again, right? Then she's back to no, I'm good. I gotta go track down May. And then she gets to the end and is like, nope, now I'm gonna kill Soul because I just found out this one big secret thing without giving this guy any chance to explain himself. Like it's just back and forth, back and forth. And it feels like it's because the story wanted them to go back and forth and didn't have time to be like, well,
Mm-hmm.
this is why I'm leaning one way or the other. May's the same way. She starts out super bad, like killing all the Jedi, doesn't care. She has this one kind of focus goal. And then all of a sudden, halfway through the jungle, because she's too afraid of Khmer or I guess, whatever she sees it as the Sith master guy is going to come after her, she betrays the whole thing. It's like, I'm just going to turn myself into the Jedi. Where'd that come from? This organization she has so much hatred for, she now all of a sudden believes they're trustworthy, is going to, surrender to them. And of course, then she doesn't. She
Yeah.
flip flops with Osha, then tries to kill Soul. It's just back and forth and back and forth. I'm not saying there wasn't a better way for these moments to happen. Like I said, I'm not opposed to the premise of them switching sides and
I
going through this
was
struggle. That's all fair. Just
I was
not written well with good rationale.
I was at least happy because the writing was kind of bad. So I thought what I thought they were gonna do when they swap sides is I thought they were gonna go the route of like Kamir and Soul not knowing that they had swapped. And I'm like, oh,
Mm.
please do not do that. That is the dumbest thing you could possibly do. That these two elite Jedi and Sith cannot tell who's who. And luckily, they don't
And they
roll
only
with
kind of
that.
half did it.
They
They
half did
half
it
did
with
it with
Soul.
Soul.
I thought writing wise
Which
that could have
that
been ridiculous, but
Yeah, no, the Jedi, they play pretty dumb a lot of the times. Like these are people who, I mean, I guess when you're talking about a bunch of force sensitive people, maybe it's harder to, read the thoughts and influence, et cetera, et cetera. But still, it does paint them in a very incapable. Is that the right word for this? I don't know. Where stuff like that would feel overly forced and not very practical with
I've
these
heard
particular characters.
I've heard Red Letter Media say it a bunch of times, but like the Jedi often are capable of everything and then sometimes nothing. It's so
Hmm.
weird how like oh they can run
Whatever
ridiculously
the
fast
story needs it to
and
be.
jump 20 feet in the 20 yards in the air, but then can't saw their way through a door sometimes. You know what I mean? It's like I don't
Yeah,
know. They're kind
it's
of all over the
convenience
place.
for the
Yeah.
sake of plot. Yeah, and sometimes I'll tell you, I can certainly be aware of that
Yeah.
stuff, but I'm forgiving of it if it serves a better story. If there's a reason that okay, I'll let stuff like that slide. But when there's no bigger payoff and it's just a dumb decision that leads to another dumb decision that didn't make sense in the first place, then it all adds up and all feels like kind of wasted
Yeah.
effort. So that was my first big issue, the whole OSHA May flip flop stuff. Them as characters, I mean, they were fine. I liked OSHA better than May in general. OSHA at least felt like she had more. They developed her more. I mean, they had more time with OSHA, so I think that helped. May, I think, would just be one way and then completely different the other, and there wasn't a lot of reason one way or the other. So she was a harder character for me to kind of associate or care about. I don't know if you had anything else you want to add as far as the OSHA May kind of dynamic.
Um, gosh, not really. I didn't really. I'll be honest. I felt like they were two. I think they're actually played by one person. I think it was one
Yeah,
person
as
playing
one
like
actress.
a dual role.
Except for the kids. The kids were separate.
Oh, were they? Oh, okay.
Which I thought that was odd. Why? I mean, I know it's hard to cast, identical twins that can act well. Not everybody can be Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen. But they got two kids that looked very different from one another, which made it confusing for me for a while. And then when I saw them as adults and they're clearly identical, like, I don't know, I thought that was a little jarring. But
how
I can
did
understand that's probably more of a casting issue than anything else.
how does two girls who have been separated for like 10 years look exactly the same when they haven't seen each other, and they have like the
You
same
know, about the
exact
hair.
haircut, and they look, they don't like change their makeup or their hair or their
Because the
outfits.
story wanted them to look the same for that initial who done it moment. We're trying to figure out who the murderer was.
all all
Which
all May has to do is cut off 10 bangs and she looks exactly like Osha.
once again, convenience for the sake of plot, which in many
Yeah.
cases I wouldn't mind, but because once again it's a kind of scaffolding here that doesn't well support that and doesn't really go anywhere, it makes those moments look all
We
the
have to
sillier.
get
So I
to
agree with that.
B from A, so
Yeah. All right. So I said the other big issue with this show, which once again is the other probably most important part, is that big kind of instigating premise, right? That kind of kicks off the whole thing. The
hmm
witches' huts, home, whatever, being
did
burned
we
down, the
did we
mom
figure
getting
out
killed, all that.
did we figure out what the witches ultimately wanted to do with the twins? They had mentioned something about a possible
No.
sacrifice, but we I don't know if they meant
Well,
I don't know if they meant just like you have to sacrifice a part of yourself, or if it was just like a phrase of words versus them actually sacrificing the girls. I think it was more of a phrase than anything.
from what I could tell, it's really hard to gather anything. They left everything very vague for that, obviously because they
hmm
want to expand upon it in a season two. Like they didn't really talk about what the Virgins was. Like they kind of did, but not really. They certainly didn't go into how the Virgins impacted these two girls,
They didn't go
how the
into.
witches split them, because there was
That's what
something
I was
where
gonna
it was
say. They
one
didn't go into
child
how
they
the one
split.
and the one mother was mostly responsible. The one mother is the
Yeah,
one
so
that
I
largely
mean,
did it.
sacrifice could have meant bringing them back together as
Oh, so
one person.
technically one gets sacrificed by joining. Yeah.
Maybe like it's all very vague, and it's also it could be interesting, right? Like I thought
Yeah.
that kind of stuff could have been cool. I hate that we're not going to get any of that until season two. Like what I thought was the more interesting story beats here, they were kind of planting, no payoff in this particular season. It's all going to be season two, assuming we get a season two. So, um, I don't know. That whole story beat though with that flashback has so many problems. I don't know. Do you want to call out any particular ones? Do you want me to go through them? Because I've
Um,
got three or four here that I have
I
an issue
mean,
with.
the Flash. Probably one of the things I was annoyed by was Torben. I his entire plot line of him just wanting to go home and being tired is
Yeah,
I found super annoying. I didn't. I just
super
he
dumb.
just like runs up into the place. Oh no, that's right. He arrives at the speeder, and then Saul catches up, and Saul's
Soul
like,
chases
"Okay,
after,
I'll
then
help
it's
you
on
up.
fire.
I'll help you get in there." And they start climbing. It's like, okay,
Yeah, like I mean, to be fair, something bad was going to happen more the other because the whole place is on fire. But the whole conflict could have played out so differently if Torben didn't rush in there, right? Because
mm-hmm,
yeah, there was a fire. They all the witches could have got out of there potentially. Like the only reason the witches died is because the Jedi interfered, right?
yeah,
Most of them probably could have found a way to escape and got out. Maybe I don't know. I know like the doors were also shut or something because of what May did. So maybe not. The whole point is Torben going did not help. Made no logical sense. Like he just wanted to go home because and kidnap these kids because that would have finished their quest essentially.
yeah,
And that was a very forced reason for. A, I know not once again Jedi are not perfect. That's kind of I think the whole point of what they were trying to show here. But you assume Torben he was a Padawan, but not like a young Padawan. Like you
no.
assume he started as a youngling. He'd been a Jedi for what 12
He
years.
looked
Who
like
knows?
90 years old in that when they find him in that hut in the
Oh yeah,
future. He's
he looked
bald and
awful there.
beard, been
Um,
sitting there for 10 years.
the
They
point
said,
being is, you think a relatively trained, even Padawan, wouldn't jump to that particular decision. Very, very rash.
yeah.
And
Lucas
if
even made
so,
even in the prequels, the children were like very even kill. They're like, Master, what would you like us to do? Like even in the prequels, the children were like trained. I don't know.
you could even, if you're really digging into it, put the fault then on the masters for not better. watching over their Padawan, maybe better explaining things. Like clearly he was having some psychological issues that
Mm-hmm.
these Jedi masters should have been like, oh, well, clearly we should probably give this guy some mental help. Like, I don't know. That was just a really bad
And
instigating
he even
factor that
caved
led this
in.
whole snowball of effects into a place.
He caved in to the one mother breaking into his brain, and you know,
Mhm.
essentially got him to flip on the Jedi just by telling him he can
Which,
go
you know what?
home.
If they would have leaned into that, maybe like if she would have still been in possession of him somehow out in the woods, and that's what spurred him to run back through some level of, influence, maybe that could have been a little more justifiable. But clearly, it was just him being tired of this place. At least that's the way I read it. I didn't like that.
You didn't
Soul, of course, then supported it. Go ahead.
oh no, I was just gonna say you didn't get any like weird vibes from Soul throughout the entire time of him like kind of following the children around. It was just kind of like he's like sneakily hiding behind trees, watching them like play and stuff. And I was just like, just weird. I don't know. He's a weird
I don't think I
character.
got the Yeah, I don't think I got the vibes that you got. I mean, I get what you're saying. I don't think that was what they were trying to portray
I
at
don't.
all.
I'm kind of
Um,
joking, but it was just weird. Like him, just like he's like sticking out behind tree, watching them play with
yeah, it's
fireflies, and
not the most subtle way either. It was a little awkward. I mean, I'll give you that much, but I don't think there was any extra underlining
it just
thing they were
and
trying to say there
also
about Soul.
he just like he was so invested in getting them out of there.
Hmm.
It's like why the children are fairly happy and taken care of. They're in a fortress with like familial things. Like what was the fear that was going to happen
Yeah,
to them?
I think
Just
this
that they need to
requires
get
you to try. You
trained.
have to.
That was the only thing they
I
need
think
to
you
get
have to read
trained.
into it a lot. Like, I guess here's the thing. Like, I don't know much about once again extended Star Wars lore that deals with like force sensitive witch force cults or whatever they called
Mm-hmm.
them. And maybe at this time that was seen as a bigger issue. Like maybe force witches were known to be more of a negative impact on the universe for whatever reason. They were, I don't know, maybe not Sith, but along those lines. So maybe there was some concern there.
And
But
they even
I don't know, that's reaching too. Like they didn't
uh,
necessarily give you enough information to make that decision, just kind of hinted at it. Um,
the
and I don't
witches
know. I
even
mean,
called the
credit.
Jedi stupid for not knowing they're there. Those Jedi have like did they show up and they're like, how do you not know that we're here? You know, why are you intruding on our thing? And it's like the Jedi don't. They just show up on this planet and they just run into these people's
I guess
houses. I don't know.
this kind of leads to another issue that this happens in a lot of stories. Like a lot of conflicts in many movie shows are caused because there's just a lack of transparency by either side, right? Like the Jedi just won't say clearly, we're here because we're checking out this virgins. And the other witches won't say, well, this happened. Like if people would just be open, it would relinquish all the issues with a lot of these
We'll just tell
conflicts.
people
And
they
they
killed
probably,
their mom.
yeah, well, I mean, yeah, there's that. I mean, the fact that that never came up over X amount of years, but
Mm-hmm.
just saying that, it's that general thing of they hide enough information from one another so the conflict can happen and kick off the story. When most, if this was a realistic scenario, you would hope there'd be a little more transparency and maybe that would help avoid a conflict. But then again, maybe that's wishful thinking. I don't know. Um,
Sorry.
so I
Go
don't
ahead.
know. I mean, Soul's character. No, you're okay. Yeah, and that's true. Soul's character and his, overly emotional state for trying to save the kids was a big issue, right? That's why
Mm-hmm.
he supported, I think, Torben trying to get in there and save the kids. Like, they wasn't listening to Ndara and the order, so there was a problem there. I think the other big kind of hinging moment that I didn't love was okay. So he kills the mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
He stabs her right in the gut,
Which, to
and
be
I think
fair,
the
she's like
show,
becoming a mist creature next to him. So
yeah,
it's like I can understand how
and
you
that's
would be
the issue.
frightful a little bit.
Yeah, the show is trying to paint his murder of their mother as just this flat out terrible thing, right? You should not have killed their mother. And that's what's basically caused May and Osha to go down these separate paths. And it's what ultimately causes him to, get killed in the end because he murdered her parent or her mother and wouldn't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like his actions were completely unjustified. Were they the right actions?
He
maybe,
shouldn't have been
maybe
there in the
not. That's
first
hard to
place. Is the
say.
problem? You know, wrong
Right.
place. Yeah.
But she was going all ghosty dust form, and
Mm-hmm.
not just her doing that, but May, like she was causing May to deteriorate. So something was happening there. He was already worried about the kids. For all he knew, she was killing the kid,
They were
and that was
controlling a
his concern.
Wookiee to attack them, and yeah.
So it's not like his action was unfounded. Once again, was it right? Not saying yes or no there, but it had some hint of I can see why that happened, which leads to the ending. I mean, you could tear down that moment a little bit more if you wanted, but the ending really comes down to then what Osha finds out. I think does May say it outright? I think May says it like Soul killed our mom. And then with no explanation by Soul, he doesn't even take a moment to be like, well, I did, but this is why. He just like, yep, I killed her. And then she just force chokes him to death.
Yeah, and he says, "I
This
love
guy who is
you."
he's basically been her father figure for what, 10, 12, I don't know how many years, most of her life. And she wouldn't think to give him at least a moment of, well, maybe there's something else here. I should probably let him explain. I mean, I know you could argue, oh, he should have explained throughout the past 10 years, but I don't know. That made that last moment feel really awkward and contrived. Because once again, I feel like that should have been a chance that he could have given some justification, and she could have then chosen to accept it or not. That would, I think, made her decision to kill him more impactful. Because then she would have
Mm-hmm.
heard the truth, and then still let her emotions come over and snap his neck instead of, oh, you killed my mom. That's just the worst thing that could have happened. Nobody's telling me otherwise.
Yeah.
Bam, you're dead. So a lot of this show just ends up being contrived in very obvious ways, convenient ways, and poorly written ways. I said the premise of the show is not bad, but there's just a lot of forced moments, forced motivations that don't add up at the end, and it leaves you in a place of like, who are these characters? What do they want? Why'd they let these things happen? And that's
I
not a good place to leave your characters at the end of a season.
I think my problem, the boys was able to avoid it oddly enough, but like my problem with a lot of modern movies and movie series and TV shows is the consistency of writers. Like when you go through like a show like this, you will see first 2 3 episodes you'll have a main writer,
Mm.
then the next 2 3 episodes each episode will have a different writer, then the main writer will come on and write the last episode of the last 2 episodes, and it's like I feel like to have a coherent and consistent story that makes sense, you have to have somebody who, I mean, maybe it's impossible in terms of like unions or in terms of like how many days on
Must be
somebody
the
can work
director.
versus not work. But like, yeah, for the most part, you should have one person in control of writing because who else is better to see their issues and see what connective tissues are missing than the person writing? And it's
Um,
like, it's Star Wars did that with the modern stuff. You have J.J. Abrams, then you bring on Rain Johnson, and then you realize, oh, we messed up with him. Let's bring back J.J. to try and correct. It's just like people correcting issues on top of things, and I don't know. I'm not saying that there were
uh,
major issues here, but maybe that could be some explanation for some of the motivation
I mean,
part
I
missing.
don't
I don't know.
in in essence, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but that's not necessarily like the rule of thumb. I'm trying to look it up real quick,
Oh, some of the writers for
because
the
even
episodes.
well, oh, let's see. I was trying to look back at like the writers for even like the original trilogy. Like they were not the same all the way through.
It
I mean, they
was,
had some people who
wasn't
were
it Kathleen?
Lawrence,
Was it Kathleen
the
Kennedy?
original trilogy.
Yeah, wasn't
No,
she?
she
Or
wasn't a
she was a
writer.
producer. She might have been a producer.
She might have been involved, but
That's right,
Lawrence
Lawrence
Kasdan is the
Kasdan.
name that keeps
Yeah.
popping
Okay.
up. But they had other people there too. Leigh Brackett. I mean, George Lucas was involved in certain aspects. I don't think it's a problem necessarily to have different writers. Sometimes that can help because if you have one writer, unless they are just excellent, and some are, sometimes writers can get stuck in their own head and miss
Mm-hmm.
stuff too. Having other perspectives can be helpful. I think the issue is you do need someone, as you said, to give a cohesive view to it. Sometimes that is like a lead writer. Sometimes it's the director who is looking at the story as a whole and figuring out how to take these stories in the writing and put it in a way that is cohesive. Now, it can definitely go different directions. Like your example of the Disney sequel with Force Awakens to Last Jedi to was it Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah.
That was extremely jarring, but I think that's like worst case scenario. It's also really common for TV series to have different writers for different episodes. Like I don't think that's unheard of. I think though a show that has a better overarching vision, a director that is worth his salt and can kind of see the whole vision and help it play out helps with that a lot. So I don't know. Don't disagree. The writing, and to be fair too, I'm not a writer, so I think whenever I try to critique someone else's writing, I feel like a little bit of a sham because I'm not saying I could do better. But it is obvious when you do see things that don't feel, I hate to say don't feel natural in a Star Wars movie, but when story beats play out in a way that like just don't make sense, that means there's an issue with the writing at some
Mm-hmm.
level. And I think I am more forgiving than some. I said I'm not a writer. I'm not the most critical guy in certain aspects. I mean, I will certainly let things go if I can enjoy the content that I'm trying to take part in. But there are things I think are overly glaring, and this show had a bunch of them.
I think you can lack in writing if you make up for it in entertainment and fun. I would not say that this show made up for
Mm.
any of its weak points in the writing in terms of being entertaining and fun. I mean,
It also depends on what the point of the show is. Like this show wasn't about being entertaining and fun. It couldn't have been. Like just the premise of the show, it was a very story-driven, character-driven show. Or
yeah,
at least it should have been. So when the characters in the story are rough around the edges, to be put it lightly, that makes the whole show suffer. Even if there are fun moments, like I said, the battles were really good. Some of the set pieces were fine. But
um,
because that's not the point of this show, I think this will be a good juxtaposition when we talk about Deadpool. Deadpool's purpose is to be fun, right?
yes, yes.
And zany and whatnot. The writing just needs to be serviceable enough. So it's the impact that the different story elements, or I should say,
Hmm.
content elements need to be to kind of have the focus on. So I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to hit on this show. The
Well,
ending I thought was dumb.
we're just
Just to
gonna
mention it,
say
like
we're 45 minutes in, so yeah, just yeah, keep going.
yeah,
Sorry.
last thoughts. The ending I did not like because they all escaped, right? May, Osha, and Camille all got away.
Yeah. Why
Why
didn't they just
did
go
May
together?
get left
Why do
behind?
they just
Yeah,
go
why did they
together?
stay
Yeah.
together? I mean, I guess the issue is May has an issue with Camille because she betrayed him, and clearly there's a conflict there. But it's not like at that moment he was looking to gun her down. He even there
Hmm.
were moments in the fight where he was kind of supportive of her. Like I think they could have gotten along long enough to get off that planet, go somewhere else, and then part ways. But no, they
I think
chose to wipe her
OSHA
memory and leave her to the Jedi.
did
Like
OSHA just want hot guy to herself? I don't know.
maybe, but all three of those characters
Hot guy
could
that
have came
killed
up with a
her
better way to
all
end
of
it.
her friends, everyone that she knows.
Yeah.
I don't
So
know.
I don't know. That I thought was a poor way to leave things. The cameos. So you had the Yoda cameo at the very
I was
end,
gonna say Yoda.
which
Yep.
man, I'm very worried about that. For one, it's not. I don't feel like it's going to be here for any good reason to have
My
Yoda in this
my
story. Like it feels like it's a lure just to get you to watch season 2. That's really all
my
it feels like to me.
my worry is that are they gonna go the route of with Yoda and the Jedi Council? Are they gonna go the route of Vernestra continuing to lie about what happened and what's happening, and Yoda again being completely unaware of what's happening
Hmm.
when he is like 1,000-year-old master Jedi and all this count the wise Jedi
Yeah,
council, are they still going to be unaware of what's happening? And it's like come on, man, y'all are supposed to be like the coolest best
exactly.
characters in this whole series, and
Like, what good is bringing Yoda in this going to do for his
other
character?
than
Like, I
make
can
him look
only see
stupid.
negatives here. It's either going to make him look stupid because they're lying to him and putting it all under the rug, and the wisest Grandmaster Jedi is just like, oh, me don't seen anything. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to ruin. I don't want to say ruin, but it's definitely going to taint future appearances of him in the prequels and the sequels and stuff like that. Um, Either that or he's complicit in it. He does
Which
know
is
there's an issue, which
just as
means he knew
worse,
about the
maybe.
Sith, and that just makes everything else have all these other bigger ramifications. So like I feel like including him only causes issues, and they just threw him in there just as a hook to bring people in, which feels really cheap. I didn't like that.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Um, then
Now,
you had the Plagueis
I was gonna
cameo,
say Plagueis. Yep.
which I'll tell you, I mean, I didn't like his cameo the way they did
I
it,
thought he
but when the
looked
show
cool.
first started, yeah, he looked fine. I guess I don't know. I when the show first started, before I knew anything about it, and they didn't really reveal Kamir and who he was, I'd kind of hoped that Sith or Dark Force user at the beginning was Plagueis. Like he was ambiguous enough that he could have been. And I thought it'd be interesting to see once again Plagueis's origin, how it impact once again leads to the stuff we were talking about.
Well,
And it still could, I suppose. It just feels less interesting him just kind of in the shadows doing his
I
thing.
was just thinking what they could be going for. I probably heard this theory somewhere. It's probably why I'm thinking of it. But because we never got an explanation of just how the girls were created by the mother who was
Hmm.
what's her name? Oh, Mother Anastasia and Coral. Because we never got an explanation of how they were birthed exactly, and it could be that where they're trying to go is that because we know that Plagueis, his ultimate thing was Anakin. Anakin was his like
Yeah.
um his
He
ultimate
conceived
creation.
Anakin through the Force. Yeah.
Anakin's supposed to be the ultimate creation that is the one. He is Jet Li, but
Yeah.
um
Great movie.
they could be they could have been keeping that secret as to how the girls were created. They could have been keeping that a secret and saying that Plagueis maybe he was experimenting, or maybe he is the one that created the
Yeah.
girls in the background, just as like a first test for him working his way towards Anakin. I don't know, just a theory.
Yeah, and there's still something interesting there. I mean,
Maybe he
it
was
didn't go
working
where
with
I
the
thought it was
witches
going to
somehow.
go.
No, they were on different planets. Maybe I
Yeah,
don't
of
know.
course he would have had to go to that planet, and he could have. I mean, these are all space traveling peoples or aliens or
Wizards.
whatever. Yeah, I don't know. There's still some hope in the Plagueis storyline. I just didn't love where it went. It actually felt a little cheaper just to have him pop up at the end, but maybe that's just me.
And
Um,
then
the last
just
thing. Oh, go ahead.
oh no, just a lot of people are speculating that at this time, because Plagueis at this time, I think I read he's only supposed to be like 10 to 15 years old. They were saying that at this
Yeah,
time, the real people that
he's
are
old.
yeah, the real people that are supposed to be in charge are like his masters. So now it's
Hmm.
like, so what's happened? I think I've read it. They're called Lord Tenebrous and Lord
Hmm.
Venomous, I believe, are the two. Like he technically at this time is like a Sith learner or Sith Padawan or something.
Which is kind of why I thought he would be the Kamir character a little bit, because I don't know. As I said, it just didn't play out the way I thought. There's still some potential there, and it could go a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of ways. I don't know if they're going to stick directly to what the current canonical lore is, because they're clearly open to changing whatever they want to for the sake of their story. So I don't know. It could kind of be whatever, which I don't know. That is probably one of the few interesting things I am curious about in a season two, but it's still kind of a wait and see thing.
Yeah, I agree.
The last thing I wanted to bring up, and this is kind of more of a fan theory or really more like a missed potential thing. I think they could have made this show a little bit better. And you can tell me if this is a dumb idea or not. So, something I didn't really like at the beginning of the show is very quickly it's revealed that Osha and May are two separate entities, right? I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to say two separate people because they're not, according to the story, but they are two separate bodies, which kind of ruins the whole murder mystery aspect at the very beginning. Like in one episode, that's resolved. Like, oh, that was my sister. The end. There's no more mystery about it. I thought it would have been a lot more interesting if maybe it really was one body, like May and Osha were one body, split personality like maybe Osha didn't know when May took over, and maybe vice versa. Even that could have led to some interesting moments where Osha maybe didn't know May was around. I mean, they could have maybe still been
Mm.
separate as kids, but when May died, once again they were created weird. Maybe something happened where May's consciousness went back to the source, went back to Osha,
Like
and
Plagueis
was kind of
can
possessing her in a way.
Plagueis because he created them. He has some sort of I don't know, way of influencing or something. I don't know.
Maybe. But I thought that could have been interesting because then it could have once again stretched out the mystery more of okay, we're seeing two different characters, but we never see them in the same place or stuff like that. So it could have made some fun, interesting things like that. And I think it also would have made the quick turns in morality a little more interesting because it's one person literally fighting herself in two different, very conflicting aspects. Like
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would have changed the story a lot. I mean, of course, with the way it played out, it wouldn't have worked exactly with their story beats. But I'm imagining a different show that would maybe a little more focused on the murder mystery aspect of it and OSHA and this conflicting kind of moral quandary. Like, I don't know, just a thought. Maybe that's
Mm-hmm.
dumb, but could have been a cooler way to play things out. So let me know your thoughts in the comments if anybody is
Yeah.
still here. So
I've just For me personally, I just have two little fun facts to throw in. I liked
Okay.
the weird, kind of funny little cameo from the guy from Alan Wake 2. The guy at the very end, he plays
Oh yes,
a guy from
the
Alan Wake
senator,
2, Senator. Yeah, he played. Who did he play? He played Mister. What's that guy's name? Mister something in Alan Wake 2. He played the
Mr.
TV
Door.
Mister
Is that
Door
it?
TV show host. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, and honestly, that was I liked his character because once again, it kind of added back to suspicion in the Jedi, right? Like these
yeah,
are just some religious nut jobs that have too much power. So that kind of goes back to one of the positives. But
yeah.
yeah, I liked his cameo.
And then apparently, from what I understand from reading, is that apparently the guy from Squid Game, Saul, apparently he never fully learned English. So he
I heard
like,
that.
I mean, I think it's obviously when you're telling, he's like probably reading directly off a script or memorizing lines. But like, yeah,
Probably had a
apparently,
voice coach to get through those
yeah,
lines.
you could tell he
If
was kind
anything,
of working his
though,
way.
like it was rough, but I still think he
He did
was
pretty
one of
good.
the
Yeah.
better characters here. Like even with the rough dialect, like he had the best emotion behind his lines. I think what he
Mm-hmm.
did had the most weight and gravitas to it. Kamir was the only other, I think, really solid performance. Who else was in here that I think actually had a good performance? Was it is it Carrie Ann Moss? That's
Carrie Ann
Trinity.
Moss, Met Matrix. Yeah,
She was fine. She was
pretty
Carrie
one
Ann
note.
Moss, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There weren't a
The
lot of
Osha May
characters in this. Yeah.
characters.
I thought they
I
were
think
pretty one
Osha was
note.
portrayed better than May, but yeah, they had their own issues. Part of it could have been writing. I don't know. Performances were a mixed bag here. A couple of standout ones. But either way, I don't know. This
Oh, we
story.
forgot a best character was the little rodent,
Don't say the beaver.
the beaver
No,
guy.
no, not the Beaver Man. I did not like Beaver Man.
I'm kidding.
Um,
He was just
I
kind
don't
of
really have
funny
anything
and
else to say
funny in
about this.
spurts. Or any
Would
excitement
you
for
recommend this show?
oh
Like, if someone's a Star Wars fan and they're considering watching this,
I think this
is
would
it
be
worth their
I
time?
think this is fun for like a mom and dad who aren't big Star Wars fans who are just wanting to watch something sci-fi. I think I have
Hmm.
that exact opinion for Halo. Like I feel like cuz my funny fact, my mom actually liked Halo and was watching it. But like it's like dumb family sci-fi. You know what I mean? It's not quite
Yeah,
like hardcore nerd sci-fi, but it's whatever. You know, I feel like it's
that's
fun
fair.
for a mom and dad see somebody flipping through the air with lightsabers. You know, entertaining for a bit.
I even think then though there's better shows to watch.
Oh
I
yeah,
would say if you're a Star Wars fan, I honestly would not watch season 1 yet until we find out if there's a season 2 and if season 2 is worth it. Because this
need to
story
see where
on
this
its own,
goes. Yeah,
season 1 leaves you with almost nothing. I think I kind of mentioned it. It doesn't resolve any of the Virgin stuff. The Osha May stuff's left even kind of unresolved. Like it just doesn't leave you in a good spot. You're not much better off than when you began. If season 2 has some big revelations and adds some context, then maybe it's a nice beginning to end watch. But right now, unless you have some real big interest in checking it out, I leave it on the back burner until we see what happens with the season 2.
mm, cool. All right, everybody. Well, that was our chat for the Acolyte, Disney's The Acolyte. Down in the comments, let us know. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Are people far more positive about it than we are? Again, I would say I didn't completely hate it. I even told Phoenix, I was like, I thought it was okay. It could be that my perspective is skewed because I am totally disconnected from modern Star Wars. Like I don't watch any. This is the first thing I've seen since the Obi-Wan show, and I actually think I liked this more than Obi-Wan, but that was just me.
Yeah, I guess it's probably better than Obi-Wan. I think it's better than Ahsoka, but barely, maybe? I don't know. All
Barely.
those are
Yeah, they're
bad for
close.
different reasons. So none of them I think are a whole lot of fun to watch, to be honest. But either way.
All right, so let's move on to something that is fun to watch.